Hello, Editor Emily here. Just wanted to say before we jump into today's episode that things aren't always sunshine and rainbows when starting out in these industries. We talk about some of the more difficult stuff today, and as with every episode, we are talking about our own personal experiences and opinions, not about the institutions and places we discuss as a rule. So thank you for joining us for today's episode, and I hope you enjoy. Cue the theme music. Hello and welcome to The Importance of Staying Earnest, the podcast where we discuss the elements of taking on a career in the arts as a young person in the modern day. So sit down, stand up, grab a tea or something stronger and come with us on our journey to find some direction in our lives. My name is Emily and with me, as always, is my fellow host and good friend, Harry.
Today we're talking about working on creative projects over long distances, the ups and downs of trying to start a theatre company, as well as hopefully having some fun stuff in the mix as well, and talking about musicals. And with us to have these wonderful conversations is this time my very talented friend, Steph. We've had a lot of Emily's friends, and this time it's my friend. How are you doing, Steph? Do you want to introduce yourself and say hello?
Yeah, hi, I'm doing great. I am an actress and singer. I've done a couple professional musicals, and currently I'm teaching and applying for drama schools for master's programs.
Oh, cool. Where are you applying? If you don't mind my asking.
Oh God, so many places. Yeah, I've applied to Mount View, Guildford School of Acting, Royal Academy of Music, Royal Welsh College of Drama, and Royal Conservatoire of Scotland.
Gosh, the full set.
Small time.
And then maybe RADA and Lambda, we'll see.
Is that to start like this coming year or like are you doing auditions at the moment?
Yeah. So I'm currently filming auditions and sending them over.
Nice. We love a good virtual
So that's
audition.
Oh yeah. For a bit of context, Steph, you are not, all of our other people that we're talking to are based in the UK. You are not currently based in the UK. And so thankfully you've joined us this evening where it's much later for you than it is for us. But you're based, you're in Qatar at the moment, aren't you? You were in Singapore,
Yeah.
You're now in Qatar.
Yeah. So my family's kind of based all over the world. We're quite an international bunch, especially my mom's side. And like my brother and I grew up pretty much everywhere between the UK, Singapore, and then the Middle East. And so Qatar is just where my family's based right now.
So what's it like trying to get all those auditions from that perspective in terms of everything you do, even though everyone's now doing it online, I suppose, but from the perspective of trying to do it and maybe judge time zones? Do you have any live auditions? I actually don't know this.
For initial auditions, I don't think any schools are doing live auditions, but I think for recalls, they might do like a live Zoom interview. And then for me, to be honest, I would just, if it was like a ridiculous time where they messaged me and it was like 3 a.m. for me, I would just send an email back because they do know like I'm technically an international student. And I have no problem if it is a ridiculous time, even if it's drama school, I have no problem just going and saying like, hey, sorry, but this is like super duper inconvenient. And normally they're super chill about it.
I'm going to say they do get international students, so they must be used to having to make sure that certain students for their auditions are at particular times.
Yeah, and I mean, I think now, especially because of, yes, the Black Lives Matter protests have sort of like pushed this into full gear, but, you know, they do sort of have, I think drama schools now have been criticized for predominantly taking, you know, white students and white British students. So there is a quota that they do have to sort of fill now. And so they do understand and for the most part, I think, are excited about getting international kids auditioning.
Yeah, definitely. What made you decide to sort of go down the UK route for schools rather than looking elsewhere?
Money, to be completely honest.
Fair enough.
If you're looking at the US, you're looking at about, and I don't know the conversion to pounds if someone wants to do it, but you're looking at around like £80,000 in fees as an international student.
Gosh.
Jeez.
And that's not including living fees and, you know, like allowances that you'd need.
Is that per year?
That's per year. And so for me, because even though I want to do this so badly and like it is my main passion, I cannot justify asking my parents to spend that much money for a career And for a degree, that doesn't guarantee you a career, if that makes sense.
And I guess particularly if there are options to do it sort of just as well, but in more cheaply.
Exactly. And I think as well, it's not, I mean, to be honest, I actually genuinely, after doing research, I do think that the training that you get in the UK is a bit more refined and a bit personal. Not that the training that you get in the US is bad, but they do give you sort of more of a platform to network in the UK, because you're not competing with as many people. If you just look at the populations between the US and the UK, you know, the UK is much, much smaller.
Yeah, definitely.
It's an interesting perspective. I don't think I've thought about that from a population perspective, because I know there's probably a decent more history naturally with the UK. So a lot of the institutions are very historical. I mean, if you look at things like, you know, Shakespeare Company or this kind of stuff, they're all based on very historical things. And so one would argue that there's a lot of that history provides a lot of insight that maybe the US wouldn't get. But the idea of we've spoken about competition actually. And so the perspective of competition making or lack thereof, for as qualified a statement as that is, would make it more of an kind of insightful or individualized process. Is quite interesting. What's the process been so far? Is it just monologues? Is it songs? How many videos of yourself?
No, because it's musicals. So each school requires a different amount of things, but normally there's a personal statement that you sort of have to give about why you want to do this. Then 1 or 2 monologues, and again, if it's 2, it's going to be contrasting. So they want like a Shakespearean or a Jacobean monologue with a contemporary one. And then the same with songs. Some schools have required a dance, so you've either had to self-choreograph something or they send you a video and you have to do it. I've also had to do slates, so like a slate to camera, which I think is a bit weird. You're basically required to stand there, say your height, your hair color, eye color, and sort of like they want to see how you look. And I'm just like, I don't know. I find that, especially for schools, a little problematic.
Yeah, that is a bit strange. I guess I don't know if it's the same for all master's courses in the UK, but I know for quite a few, the way that they effectively like select the final students to be a part of the program, because there are so few spots, is essentially they're casting for a show. Because I believe that for a lot of master's programs, it's essentially you will put on a production. And so like I've got various friends that have auditioned for drama school and they've gotten through really far, and then they've found out they've not got in, and a couple of times have been able to get feedback, and it's actually just been a case of there wasn't a role for them in the show that they were that they happened to do that year and stuff. So I don't know maybe whether it's to do with that kind of thing, but that does feel a bit
I think it's like what I said about the quota, right? Which like there's good and bad things, because obviously with a quota of like diverse candidates, I guess there are fewer people who audition because it's just not in our culture, whether that's Arab, Asian, you know, African American. It's just not really in our culture. Our parents are very much like, no, you have to do sensible things. So there are very few of us who audition. But then at the same time, when you do get that spot or you do get that role, there is always that voice in the back of your mind that goes, am I just here because I am the diversity candidate? Am I here because I am the token Middle Easterner performer?
Interesting. I'd never thought of it from that perspective before.
Like that.
Well, I've had that, and I've been told by certain people, like, oh, you got this role pretty much because of how you look. And it's like, it's not about the talent. And for them, the excuse is, oh, you've just gotten this because of how you look. And then you sort of start to tell yourself that narrative. And I mean, it happens. I think in the recent production of 9 to 5 that was on the West End, one of the dancers spoke about this. Like, when he got his script, it said black dancer on it. Like, that's literally the label that was put on his script.
Wow,
there is a case to be made, though, in terms of like, so we operating in a visual medium, there is a capacity for casting visually, and so there's a perspective that could be taken. And I agree with you. I think if you diminuate a role entirely just onto someone's looks. I think that's ridiculous, because you should always cast talent first. But there is a case to be made that certain casting choices you have to take into account.
I think there are
the
definitely
visual aspect
certain
will be.
roles that it's important, particularly say if it's a show that's based on something historical, or if the fact that this person has a particular racial background is like key to, you know, some of the plot or whatever, then like of course. But say it sounds like in the example you gave there, Steph, that it was literally like a background dancing role, and therefore
that seems a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, that, I mean, obviously I don't know, maybe there was more context to it, but that does feel a bit much.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think I wrote an essay about this in when I was at uni. But definitely you have shows like Hairspray or The Color Purple and stuff where like race absolutely matters, or Miss Saigon.
Yeah.
And you have to cast accurately. But there are shows like, for example, Les Mis, even though it's historically France, it's fictional. And they are doing a much better job of casting more diverse. And then shows like Phantom, I guess, or like what I did, Jekyll and Hyde. Like, yeah, okay, they're based in, you know, certain locations, but at the end of the day, they're fictional. And anyone with any kind of look could be cast in those principal roles, and it doesn't matter.
No, I agree. I think it's a really interesting topic, and obviously you guys went to the same uni. I don't know about what your experience is, whether you got involved with much of the theatre stuff there, Steph.
Our uni experience is interesting, actually, I think.
Oh, really?
So you were more involved than me, but we didn't get cast in anything throughout uni until... So you did a community theatre show in Exeter, not with the uni.
Yeah, so my first uni show I got involved with was in my second year, and that was a creative team role. I only got cast in a show in my third year, and actually that was even met with a bit of push by the committee, who said, "Are you sure you want her?" Because I was picked over somebody who had gotten roles a lot before in the past. And they said, "Are you sure you want to put Steph as your first role?" But thankfully, the creative team for that show were awesome, and they were like, "No, we do want her because she's better."
Was it quite
like, who cares if this person's been cast?
Was it quite cliquey and such?
Very cliquey. And that's actually why I went to sort of into the community, because, you know, my thinking was like, I love this and I want to be involved. So I was like, okay, did all my auditions, didn't get anything in my first year, or really first semester, I should say. And so I went out, I looked at other things that were happening, and I happened to see an audition for community theater production, and I got cast in that. So I was like, why shouldn't I do that? I just want to get experience. And I met with a lot of backlash and a lot of hate, actually, for doing things outside of the uni, because there was sort of, I think, this mindset of like, that is not how we do things here. People don't come to the uni and then go out into the community and do other things.
That's so bizarre.
Like, it was weird.
That's so strange.
It's strange to think how different it was, because I remember when you were saying that you were in, what was the production you did before
Oliver.
Grease? Oliver, that was the one. And I remember you being like, "Oh, you're in Oliver." I was like, and looking through all the stuff for it, I was thinking, this is just not to do with the uni. That's surreal. Because I don't think anyone else, in our year especially, until second year and the bombshell that was Grease, occurred, I don't think anyone had even thought about community theatre as an option, just to go out and get experience. And that ended up being your primary source of, I mean, you got a lot of social contacts, you've got a lot of friends and stuff. It eventually led to you starting the company that you tried to get off the ground through that avenue. So it's that difference, that willingness to put yourself in a slightly different position actually defined a lot of what your story was over the 3 years at uni.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Do you want to talk a bit about what that looked like in terms of timings, or trying to balance uni life, or what people suggested to you off the back of that? Because I know you got one of them involved in one of your uni projects, didn't you?
I did. So the first person that I met who actually was the director of Oliver, Lynn Burgoyne, who is like, she became like my mom in Exeter. She was one of just the sweetest ladies ever. And I remember I went in and auditioned for Nancy in Oliver. And she came out after my audition, which, like, by the way, this never, ever happens. And she said to me, "You would be amazing in this role. You have a stunning voice. But the man that we have cast as Bill is in his 50s, and I'm just not going to put you on stage with him." And I really appreciated that. And she was like, "But because we really loved you, I'm going to give you this smaller speaking part," which was still, you know, a part in a show. And that was just something I really appreciated. And I kept in contact with her. I also met my business partner during that show, because while I was playing a character in the first act, I was in the ensemble in the second act. And I mean, being a principal, while it is great, it can sometimes be quite isolating.
Definitely.
And so being in the ensemble is a great way to meet new people. And that's how I met her. And then through her, I met a bunch of other people. And that's how I met Sarah and David, who directed me and Jekyll and Hyde, which was a dream show of mine to perform in. And I still remain very close with them, actually. They've both helped me a lot in my drama school auditions. And so, yeah, I made all these amazing friends and amazing connections that I wouldn't have if I just sort of stuck to the clickiness of musical theatre in Exeter Uni.
I'm listening to this from like such a different perspective, and it's really interesting to me to hear it. But it's like, so for a bit of context for you, Steph, so I went to Manchester and I was in the committee for Drama Society there for a couple of years. And I mean, to be fair, when I arrived in my first year, there definitely was an element of the sort of, you know, the kind of almost like inner circle that you need to get your way into, that it kind of sounds like it very much was at Exeter. And then we sort of like changed some of the ways about how shows were put on, and that definitely changed considerably throughout the time I was there. But, you know, I also remember I had friends who, you know, we were all just there to do things. And like I know someone who really wanted to do some Shakespeare, and there just never really seemed to be any Shakespeare put on with the Drama Society. So they made a Shakespeare Society, and the two societies worked closely together. And, you know, it was all about finding opportunities, making opportunities. I had a few friends that went out and did things in the city outside of uni, and everyone would celebrate that and, you know, go support it. So it feels so bizarre. And, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, like, theatre is about community and about people and bringing people together and sharing stories. And so to have a group of people that sort of frown upon someone doing that just seems bizarre and kind of goes against what it's all about, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, it's tricky, because while I do think there are, at least with Exeter, a few people who, you know, got into the inner circle and really did try, I feel like it was, you know, at least for me, it was like, it's a little too late. And it sucked that those people had to almost, I don't want to say this, but I don't know another way to say it, basically prostitute themselves out to get into these committees.
Right.
Before any change was going to be made. And I think maybe a lot of people didn't like me because I refused to do that. I refused to, be all worshipping of these people who were considered at the top. I was like, no, you haven't done anything to gain my respect. So why should I just bend over and do exactly what you tell me to do?
Yeah, no, good for you.
Do you think there's in the wider context, obviously there's a lot of discussion in terms of when to stick and when to fold, to turn a phrase, with acting especially, you know, what roles do you take for the sake of moving forward that you may not be as comfortable with? And there's a lot, again, God, we've been way too political already. But what's coming out, especially with Hollywood in recent years, where do you think the line is drawn, especially starting out, where it's kind of everything is taken, you know, take every inch, every millimeter of experience or something that's thrown at you? What do you think how have you found trying to navigate that, not only from a uni perspective, but trying to enter into the more professional space as well?
Yeah, it's tough. Look, for me, I've come from a long line of very, very strongly opinionated women. And
I hadn't noticed.
For me, if I am ever feeling taken advantage of, or I feel like what I'm doing is not going to garner any benefits, then yeah, I'm not going to do it. So to be honest, I haven't really experienced this much professionally. In terms of applying for professional jobs, whether that is performing or teaching, it was really in the amateur world where I sort of experienced that if you don't do, or if you are not exactly what we need you to be, and you don't do things in the way that we want you to do things. So like if you don't climb your way up the ladder in the way that everyone else has done it, then we're not going to accept you.
That's kind of wild. You'd think that would be the other way around, wouldn't you?
I know, but I think as well, because now, like you said, there's such a spotlight on Hollywood and sort of the injustices, especially taking advantage of younger actors who are like hungry to get work. I think, it's calmed down a lot and people are a lot more respectful. Whereas in the amateur industry, it's like, well, no one's looking over us. No one is there to sort of censor, I guess, or comment on what we're doing and what we're saying. And it's the same group of people, right? Whereas the professional industry, people come, people go. It's ever changing, ever moving. Whereas a lot of these small towns, especially, I mean, Manchester is different because it's, a bigger city. I guess community theatre in London as well will be different. But in Exeter, it's that same group of people that are running everything. And they don't like when you do something different.
I suppose there's a strange solidarity and consistency to amateur theatre because of the nature of it being opt-in, as opposed to the professional game has to continue to move. I suppose I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, I guess particularly with sort of like Amdram type stuff, it's if you don't like it, you can leave. Like no one's forcing you to be there, no one's paying you to be there, because it's not a workplace. There's no specific like guidelines. You can't necessarily get people in trouble, call unions, sue, whatever it might be, over someone behaving inappropriately.
Speaking on the lines of community theatre and stuff, I don't know if you wanted to talk a bit about your endeavours with Evolve, Steph. I don't know where they're at currently. Obviously, my last update on that was about a month ago or so. But you did some pretty fantastic things while you were at uni, and it seems to be that the pandemic has caused. We've been very lucky to talk to a lot of people who also have companies. Emily, you've got one that you're working on at the moment. I didn't know if Steph, you wanted to talk about your experience with trying to run that and getting that off the ground, especially in, as we've just mentioned, an environment like Exeter, which is very established in its own right and quite unmoving, despite maybe not being the biggest community in the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I met my business partner in Oliver, and then, we had a great time together in that show, and we became, very close very quickly, as you normally do in a show. And we sort of been starting to talk about, and she mentioned the injustices, or injustices makes it sound so serious, but I guess like this stuff that was going on within the community and how it wasn't really fair and it was super duper biased, and it's the same group of people always getting roles and no one is given an opportunity to do anything different. People who might not be very good but still love theater never get to do shows because they're never cast. And so after this massive shitstorm that happened with a production of Grease, which I won't go into, we decided that we would start a company that was just going to be inclusive and give everyone an opportunity to perform and get on stage and learn, and just have fun. And we ended up in May of 2019 putting on a really great concert. We did a one-day show with 2 shows, and we ended up overturning a profit. And we had so many people involved, like all the way from, kids aged about 6 to people, older people in their late 50s, early 60s. And it was great, and it fostered a wonderful environment. Things were fair. And I was sort of finally like, this is what a theater company, I guess an amateur theater company should be, right? Sort of working to allow people to perform and just learn from one another, and not like cutting people off at the knees just because, they're not in the inner circle. And then we did Rent, and we thought, okay, Rent is going to be a little more fine-tuned, I guess. But the creative team, who had seen our first lot of concerts, were like, we sort of want to get everyone involved, and actually everyone ended up getting cast in the show. And, then the pandemic happened, and then issues sort of started to overturn from there because I wasn't there. It's very difficult to be 8 hours ahead and to sort of still be involved in something in a different country. And then I guess my priorities changed as well. I looked inward to myself and went, I'm not really ever going to go back to Exeter. I don't want to limit myself to an amateur career in Exeter. I want to move on, and the only way sort of for me to move on was not to be involved in a company that does take a lot of time to manage. And so for me, I just thought the best thing to do is just to step away. I step away fairly, obviously, because I put quite a lot into the company financially. So to get financial, I guess, restitution for my half. But not to sort of screw anyone over, and just sort of to let the company evolve, I guess you could say, as it wants to, just without me.
Yeah, I think that's a really brave decision, and to come to and look with it and realize what would be the best for you, like not just in the next year or two, but what you're looking for out of the next 5, 10 plus years, out of your whole career. Do you know what you want to, obviously you've mentioned you're applying to drama schools, so do you reckon the goal for you, would you be looking to set up a similar company again in the future, or is it sort of you're more focused on performance and such at the moment?
I think currently, yeah, I'm focused on performing, and I'm focused on getting my career started. But I've been teaching freelance voice because I've just recently become actually a certified voice teacher with Vocal Health First Aid in the UK. Thank you. And I think eventually, or because obviously even if you get a first job, a second job is not guaranteed, etc. So there will be lulls in your career, and actors who were working have now been out of work for a year because of the pandemic. So teaching is a nice side hustle, and maybe to eventually develop a school that has an after school program or curriculum for kids who are serious about performing, because I don't really feel like one exists. You could go to a dance class, you can go to voice classes, but there isn't any place or any school, I think, that has a set curriculum that encompasses how to sort of I guess pre-professional journey,
almost like a structured course as opposed to one-off lessons.
Exactly. And I think me personally, I've benefited from that. And I think there are lots of kids who would, because, again, going to these one-off classes, it takes discipline or very, very forceful parents. And I think just providing a nice course that sort of encompasses everything, especially for musical theater. Outside of the UK, college is not really a thing. So, you can't really specialize. You go to high school and you do your set subjects. And there isn't really, any other kind of, I guess, curricular qualification that you can get besides that. And so that would be something, I guess, that I would be looking to start maybe, 10, 15 years down the line, not right now.
Sure. No, that sounds really cool.
Do you think there's, in your experience of obviously meeting a lot of people very fast in the Exeter community, to circle it back, there's that kind of that tension between knowing people professionally and then knowing them as friends, and then realizing, because it's not theatre and I think I would say the creative industries in general, because they kind of work project to project as far as I can tell. You meet a bunch of people per project, and you feel suddenly oh, they're my family, I know them, this, that, and the other. But do you think, how do you go about every project kind of maybe with the knowledge that you're going to make friends that you're never going to see again? Because I know there's a bunch of people from uni that I know, and there were days when I was like, wow, I'm probably never going to see this person again, despite being friends with them, because I'm just not
Yeah.
that good of friends with them. What are your thoughts on those kinds of relationships, and trying to either pursue them or leave them, or what's give us your wisdom, Steph.
I think within the context of like community theater or student theater, there is a really blurred line between like friendship and then I guess being on a creative team or a person of authority. Because like in the professional industry, you know who's your boss, and there's those very, very clear lines, and you could be friends with them, but there still is that clear line. Whereas in amateur or more student theater, there isn't. And I do think sometimes it gets muddled. The people that I have personally really stayed in touch with are people who were able to draw those lines when it was needed and then take them away when it was appropriate. The people that I've not stayed really close with are the people where that line was super blurred and you don't know the boundaries of your relationships. So like I like to use, I guess, someone like Lynn or David and Sarah as an example, who have all directed me, but who are all like very, very close friends of mine as well. They were able to put those lines and put those boundaries when they were in director mode. And it's like, I'm the director now, you are my actor, this is how we're gonna work. And then we could take that line away and go to the pub and talk about something else. Whereas the people who were like, oh yeah, you're directing me, but we're also really friends, so please let me get away with being late or not knowing my lines or whatever. And then not accepting it when you did put the fist down and go, no, wait, hang on a second, I am your musical director, I am your director, I have a right to say these things to you. Those are the relationships that have sort of faded. And maybe as well, I guess, to be honest, the relationships that have stayed with me are more between directors that I've known or producers that I've known rather than other actors. I don't know. I think maybe there's always that underlying competition between other actors where you're viewed as someone to sort of beat in the next audition. And so like when you get cast and stuff, you're friends. But then when that show's done, it's like, oh, now we're on to the next audition and you're my competition again. Which I think is interesting.
I suffer from that.
Yeah.
I know that. I think we've discussed it before, Emily, on this.
Yeah.
Just like,
and I don't know. I mean, like, Harry, it's weird. Like, for me, a lot of the people who I have, at least actors who I have been close with, are men, not women. And I think it is because of that competition. Other women are your competition, whereas like men are like, okay, well, we're not going to go for the same parts anyway, so we can just actually be friends.
Yeah, I think it's such a hard line to like be able to sort of toe. And I'm not coming from an acting perspective. I do more directing, which can be a skill in itself in order to
absolutely,
like work out when to be friends with everyone. And also, I remember particularly when I was doing student theatre, because you're working with like people who are your peers and might even be your friends outside of the show, and so to accept that actually sometimes it might be that all the cast are going to become best friends and you might end up being a bit removed because of the role you're in was tough. But like, I know my current job, there's sort of a load of us who are a similar age, all kind of starting out in the industry, and we're constantly all going up against each other for the same jobs. And
yeah,
I think luckily most of us have kind of come to this point where we're all able to just sort of say like, you know what, that's just how it is. And we've all, I'm quite sort of like proud of everyone to be able to, I suppose, just put pride aside, I suppose. And, we've all kind of said congratulations to everyone else when they've got the job over us, or, and accept that hopefully they'll be happy for me when it's my turn and I'll be happy for them when it's their turn. But I think it's such a hard thing to do, and I think it often can only really happen if you're good enough friends with someone, almost, to be able to have that sort of level of kind of, not respect, it's not if you don't respect people that you're not such good friends with, but like that level of being able to sort of be put those feelings aside, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's about getting rid of the pettiness I think that we all have. And I'm not saying that, there have been times when I've been extremely petty about things as well. But just getting rid of that and allowing yourself to be happy for someone else, which, to be honest, from a lot of other actors, I guess, that I met, I never felt that support. It was always, there was an excuse as to, why bad things were being said about me behind my back. I mean, and this was not only from students, this was from full-grown adults as well.
Wow.
Which shocked me.
Yeah. And was that in the sort of like community theatre setting in Exeter? Or
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah. I mean, the things that were said about me by a few committee members of a company that I will not name. And then being told this by someone like, I basically was told this by another cast member of Rent when she joined. She was like, you are not at all what people were saying about you. And I was like, hang on, wait, what were people saying about me? And she sort of said, she told me this. And I was just like, wait, hang on. These are like grown ass people. This is like a woman in her 50s, another woman, maybe probably in her 60s, and then their husbands. Like, are you actually kidding me right now? Like,
That's ridiculous.
You're saying this about like a 22-year-old also, that's like just stuff that's just like not true. And clearly not just keeping it amongst the committee, but also telling people who are in the cast or just anybody who
Like
would ask about the situation.
Openly just being unnecessarily awful. Well,
and it's like, yeah, it's you just sort of think to yourself as well. Maybe I guess that's also one of the reasons that I guess made me not want to be involved in the Exeter community scene anymore, was just that like it's emotionally draining. Like knowing that you're trying to do what's best for you and for your company or a project that you're working on, and then having people like be assholes about it.
Yeah. Well, all I can say is good on you for like, it sounds like you've sort of constantly, while you were at university, made the steps to create the environment that you could get what you wanted out of it, and that was an environment that you like being in, whether it's taking that step out of university to go to join community theatre so that you actually have the opportunity to act and perform, and then when the community theatre setting wasn't necessarily the nicest in return, you created your own sort of show and company to do that with, which just good on you, I guess.
Oh, thank you.
Emily, what's your position? Because I'm interested in your perspective on, obviously, you've got a lot of friends from Manchester who have, and all your friends in that regard have, you're reasonably close. We've talked to a number of them. What's your perspective, listening from a Manchester perspective, where you had a very positive experience and you have all these positive relationships with a bunch of friends who, a number of them we've talked to. What's your kind of raw input perspective on hearing mine and Steph's slightly less utopian experience?
Honestly, I think it's just such a shame, because for me, while I think there is great value and I'm really glad to be, outside the university setting doing theatre now, I really enjoyed making the most of those 3 years of opportunities that I had to make theatre in that setting with a load of like-minded people who were all, sort of in this like young, energetic, fresh, full of ideas, some of which were great, some of which not so much, but hey, we'll give them all a go anyway, kind of place. And it was, a really good experience for me. And so I think from that perspective, like, I feel disappointed for both of you, because obviously neither of you will have rocked up to university expecting that atmosphere or wanting that sort of dynamic at the university at all. But also in a certain way, I'm not 100% surprised that ethos and atmosphere exists. I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I mean, in my first year, it was definitely far more cliquey than it was in my second and third year. I was quite lucky that literally was the perfect play for me happened to be put on in my first year, so I got involved with that. But I mean, I was one of very few people in my year group who did get involved with the drama society in the first year, and it was kind of to do with the way that plays were put on. The society put on loads of plays every year, but in my first year it would all be that essentially a group of friends would come together, go to the committee and say, we want to put this on. There were certain seasons of plays, and basically people could put forward their applications to put on a performance, and a certain number would be selected. You'd be given a venue, a budget, etc., etc. And then in my second year, and you know, it was by no means me who led the charge on this, so I'm not taking credit for it, but a new system got put into place whereby people would submit a script that they want to be put on, whether it was something that they'd written themselves, because we did a lot of new writing, or a published play that they wanted to direct. So you'd either literally just be submitting the script, or yourself as a singular director with a, you know, published play that you want to put on, and then other people would apply to be a producer, an assistant director, a director, whatever, and then the society would pick which plays were going to be put on, but then also sort of put together those creative teams, which would mean that they wouldn't necessarily all be best friends. They'd often be people from different year groups who were in different circles. And I think that allowed it to almost be run in a more professional manner, in terms of, you know, people were working together, and a lot of them became really good friends out of those sort of creative teams that were created. But it also meant that people who were being cast wasn't just everyone's best mate or their flatmate or whatever.
So we actually had that same system
really?
in Exeter, the one that you just described, except for it did not work like that for the most part. I mean, I remember being on the creative team for Urinetown and being told by the director, we cannot cast this person for X, Y, and Z. And it was like personal reasons.
Gosh.
It was not about their talent.
Interesting. That's really interesting. It's just, yeah.
You know,
I'm struggling to understand how on earth people can, yeah. I guess it's quite easy to get sort of like caught up in that almost like uni bubble, I'd often refer to it as. Yeah, I guess it's just a shame that there weren't more people who, I suppose, like you, were sort of doing their best to include more people, and didn't just think, okay, brilliant, here's a good excuse for me to have a laugh with my friends for the next couple of months while we work on this show.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I also, you know, I don't know what it is. I talked to my friend, my two friends, Lila and Katie, about this, but often being told that I can't do things or I shouldn't do things because that's not the way it's done. And I don't understand how British culture and British people work and think. And I was told that a lot by a lot of different people who I thought were my friends, people who sort of, I guess, were in positions of power. And then I guess I kind of listened to, not that I'm saying it's the same thing at all, but I was listening to the Meghan Markle and Prince Harry interview with Oprah. And they were talking about how British racism is very different from American racism. So American racism is a lot more direct and in your face, and it's very obviously racism. Whereas British racism comes a lot more as criticism. And it's phrased as like, you can't do things or you shouldn't do things because this is not how the public or the community will see it. And again, not that I even experienced it all that much, but I did experience it. And just like people thinking, I guess, that that's okay. I think that definitely needs to change. And not that I'm saying that Theatre at Exeter is racist, but also I don't see that much diversity, and people can say all they want that it doesn't exist, but it does.
Yeah, I think diversity, there's a real problem with it with a lot of shows at universities. I know we ended up, while I was at uni, had a lot of conversations about it. And, you know, I remember us having this conversation on the committee once saying, like, you know, this is getting ridiculous. Like, why is there not more diversity, like, within the society that we're seeing on stages and everything? And we sort of ended up having these conversations around whether the parts aren't there in the first place, or whether the people unfortunately aren't there. But the University of Manchester is huge. Like, of course there are, while perhaps the drama course itself wasn't that diverse, it's a very diverse university. There's loads of international students, there's loads of students from the UK who have all kinds of backgrounds, and I know it was actually the year after I left, they put on a Rachel Tucker Green play, and they had an amazing cast.
Oh, I mean, that's amazing. And to be honest, I wish Exeter would do that, because like you said, they might not exist within the department, the people who are doing the course, but there are loads of people, international kids, even at Exeter, like probably not as much as Manchester. But the main comment that you would get is that people just didn't feel welcome by the societies. And that's why they didn't, like, they would maybe go on audition for one show and the experience wouldn't be great and they wouldn't feel welcome, so they just wouldn't come back.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people have a lot of work to do in order to try and create change in that. I think a lot of work needs to be done, but I really hope that
it's going to take time.
Yeah.
And I think, but the thing is that people are not acknowledging it. Like I said, you know, it's easier to acknowledge in the US because it's a lot more in your face there. It's obvious. Whereas it's a lot more subtle in the UK. But that doesn't mean that the problem doesn't exist.
No. It was interesting. I watched an interview this morning. So at the time of recording, the interview with Meghan and Harry came out in the UK last night, US the night before. And this morning I put the news on, and Victoria Derbyshire was interviewed. I think he was part of the Society of Editors for sort of like UK newspapers. And she was interviewing him and was asking him about, I don't know if you've sort of seen on social media, but like, you know, the sort of comparisons between how Kate has been like portrayed in the past compared to Meghan doing the exact same things but being portrayed in a completely different light. And she didn't even go in asking, is this racist? She just said, like, how could this happen, and like what's going to change? And he just straight up was like, well, there's no problem, people are just reporting the events. And I mean, I just sat there with my mouth open. You could just see Victoria Derbyshire, poor woman, trying to, like, she was literally sweating. Like, she just looked shocked, and in the end started Googling stuff on her phone and said, how on earth can you tell me that this is not racism? And this man was sat there saying, no, it's not. And this is one of the people who's in charge of the British tabloid. And it just, the sheer, I don't even know if it's denial, but this complete lack of awareness just shocked me. It really did.
And when you have that, and it's so widespread in the country, people make these subconscious comments and they don't realize how problematic it is. I mean, yes, okay, you know, I didn't grow up in the UK. I have an American accent. I am, you know, of Middle Eastern origin, so I don't look the same as everyone else. But that doesn't mean that I don't understand other cultures. Like, if anything, I would understand it more because I've been around more. Like, I mean, just about sort of discussing things in how things are going to work, either within, you know, Evolve, my company, or within a creative team in Exeter, I was often told, like, you cannot do that, or no, sorry, we can't include this because, well, the British people just won't respond well to it, and it's okay, but you just don't know what English people are like. And it's like, if anything, that's furthering, it's making our differences more widespread, instead of saying, actually, no, hang on, let's come together. Let's, you know, talk about how I view musical theater as someone who grew up in an American system versus how you view musical theater in a British system. But that's not done. It's, you do things our way and how we expect you to do it, or, you know, whatever.
Yeah. I think particularly amongst sort of professional companies as opposed to like Amdram community theatre type companies, there has been a bit more of a movement towards accessibility and have those conversations, and you know, in certain scenarios like quotas, like with the drama schools and stuff like that you mentioned earlier.
I think it is changing. I mean, like, I was told by a teacher when I was younger that I shouldn't really look to get into this industry because there aren't many roles for people who look like me, and that a lot of the dream roles that I've had are just like they're too far-fetched. Like, this teacher was like, that's never going to happen. You need to sort of think more practically. And then doing a bit more professional work, and then talking to an agent actually last year before this pandemic, who then said the opposite and said, no, in this industry right now, push your ethnicity. Like, push it. Push the fact that you are different, that you look different, that you sound different. And I think people need to do that, like you said, until there is an even playing field.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Harry, on that note, and not to make light of the conversation we've just had, but to perhaps end things on a slightly lighter note, I suppose. I don't know whether Harry has told you, but we like to try and play.
I have not.
Okay, well, we like to try and play a little game with everyone who comes on, if that's okay with you. Partially just to sort of see
games.
Your creative process when you get given situations. But I think, many of us have faced difficult situations while starting out in the industry, and I'm sure they will continue. However, some of them, you end up being put in scenarios that are perhaps a little bit unusual. Perhaps it's not the world's best show, or there are certain issues around budget or ideas and such. And so we've got a little creative brief that we'll give to you, and we'd like to just see how you'd go about tackling it, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Harry, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, so it's both vague and specific at the same time. So you've been cast in a supporting role. It's still a big role, but a supporting role in a new writing musical. It's jazz age, 1920s, about a group of friends who have found a shared love for literature in the time of the Roaring Twenties and parties and all that kind of stuff. However, your character has very little details on the page, and you're not particularly you're compelled by the concept, but not necessarily by the details in the writing. So what I think we want to know is how would you approach that role? What would be the questions you'd ask? What would be the conversations you'd have? What are your thoughts upon approaching that project as you realize the gaps maybe on the page? How do you take that forward?
So, well, the first thing I would do is what I do with any show anyways, just look at what clues the text does give you, because even if it's not super duper obvious, if IB literature has taught us anything, it's to read in between the lines and to pull things out. Subsequently, I would look at also the relationships between the different characters, because that really sort of helps let you or inform yourself about your own character, their relationships with others. I don't think there's an issue during the process just asking the director, sorry, I can't speak, asking the director if you're not sure on anything. I think they'd always rather you do that than do something outlandish and then have to be corrected on it. And then finally, I think, again, a lot of, characters in theater, especially musical theater and new age musicals, I guess, in particular, there's a lot of interpretation that can be had, and people are looking at you to see what you bring to a role. So, for example, every person who plays Elphaba in Wicked is not going to be exactly the same version of Elphaba. They're all going to have a different interpretation. And I think you can do that. Things are not super duper rigid in theater, and I think taking creative liberty as an actor, to a certain extent, I feel like actually most directors and producers appreciate that.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Well, thank you for doing that, and obviously for coming on in general. If you would like to, we also like to give everyone 30 seconds to plug...
I have the timer.
Oh, fab. It's normally me. I was suddenly thinking on my phone.
I know.
God, I've not got it ready.
It's my friend. I have the timer.
Yes. So yeah, we will give you 30 seconds to plug whatever you want, whether that's how people can find you on social media, things that you would like to do, or anything like that. Any plugs that you have. Harry, when you're...
Are you going to tell me when to go?
I am going to tell you when to go. I am going to tell you when to go, don't worry. So, in 3, 2, 1, go.
So just to, I guess, see what I'm up to, follow me on social media, Instagram and TikTok. I have the same handle, Steph_Yanuka. It's Steph with a PH, and Yanuka is YIANNOUKA. If you just like to see some fun singing videos, or if you actually do want voice lessons, I can help both amateurs and professionals because she is now a certified voice teacher. Yeah, that's it.
Woohoo!
Damn, you had that ready. On that bombshell,
While we feel old,
to keep referencing Top Gear, thank you, Steph, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
oh, we had some really good conversations there. I think I'm really glad we had those chats with Steph, and she was really interesting to talk to.
Oh, she's prime for that. I think I've lost count of the number of times that we've had conversations similar, and they're important, like really important to have those kinds of conversations, especially in an industry that is, people dream about, and it's not always sunshine and rainbows, and that's important to discuss. Even if we're not going to solve the world's problems in 45 minutes of a conversation, just having it makes you feel a little bit better. Or a little bit, or a little bit worse.
And I think that's it.
Better.
It's yes, we're not solving things, but it's the start of a conversation or a continuing of a conversation rather than the whole thing. And so,
for sure,
I have no doubt that a lot of the things that we brought up, we will almost circle back round to at some point and continue this discussion.
Yeah, I've mentioned to you post recording it the amount that I've thought about it, right? So if nothing else, it's really caused me to reflect and to think, and I think that's really important, because it's easy to just hold an opinion. Sometimes discussing it, you can really pry open those corners of your brain and what you think.
And hey, you know what? If this conversation made you think, then there's definitely hope that at least some of you listening, hopefully it'll give you a bit of a think as well.
Yeah, if that's all I can ask. Thank you for listening to The Importance of Staying Earnest. If you want to keep up with us outside the podcast, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at TIOSE_podcast, or on Facebook at The Importance of Staying Earnest podcast. If you would like to reach out to us, you can find us at tiose.podcast@gmail.com. Please drop us a review if you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.